Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura if you're new here, and today I'm wrapping up what I read in May. Before we start, I just wanted to take a second to talk about what's going on in the world right now. There have been 2 more Black people murdered by police officers, one in the States and one in my own backyard in Toronto. And I wanted to take a moment to encourage everyone to speak up, say something, and support in whatever way that you're able to. I'll leave a link down below to a page that will show you a whole bunch of resources where you can either donate if you're able to, but if not, that's okay. There are also petitions to sign, stuff like that, things that literally anybody can do. But mostly I encourage you all to speak up and say something, because silence is not the answer. Silence is not going to change anything. Change will only happen when all of us participate. So participate in any way that you can. I don't care if you have 1 follower or 1 million, you need to speak up. I know for my videos, I mean, I get usually between 10 and 30 views at the most. So it feels pointless for me to be doing this, but it's not pointless. So do it. Even if nobody watches it, you're still helping in the absolute barest minimum of ways. This is something that all of us can do, and there is no excuse not to do it. And in this community, as readers, there are so many things that we can do. Like, we can make an effort to read more Black authors. We can read non-fiction books, especially by Black authors. We can educate ourselves. We can stop supporting authors who we know are problematic. There are things that you can do. I know it feels hopeless and that, you know, you're just one person and what can you do? These are some of the things that you can do. I am definitely not an educator on this. I'm not an expert in any sense of the word. I'm just a person who wants to help, and this is how I've been told that I can help. So please help in any way that you can, and not just right now, but always. I mean, this is something that I personally have to work on as well, is rallying for this cause. Not just when there's a name in the news. This needs to be something that we talk about all the time, every day of the year, and we don't. We only talk about it when there's a name in the news, and that needs to stop. So make your voice heard, but obviously don't speak over Black people, but still help out, support in any way that you possibly can. And if you're able to donate, even $5 makes a big difference. It all adds up. So if you can, please help out. So on to the books that I read for this month. I read a total of 8 books and DNF 2, which gave me a grand total of 3,446 pages read. 6 of these books I physically owned. 1 of them I read off a script, and 3 were from my library. For the format that I read these books in, 6 of them were print copies, 3 were ebooks, and 1 was an audiobook. And then genre breakdown, this does not include DNFs. I read 1 horror, 3 sci-fi, 3 fantasy, and 1 romance. And then my star rating for the month also does not include DNFs. 1 3.5, 4 4 stars, 2 4.5, and 1 5 star. 3 of these books were for an adult audience, and 5 of them were for a young adult audience. The longest book that I read was Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy by Cassandra Clare, which was 655 pages. And the shortest book that I read was Exit Strategy by Martha Wells, which was 176 pages. I did 2 readathons this month. One of them was Medievalathon, hosted by Holly Hart's Books, which was a month-long readathon, and the other was Tome Topple, hosted by Thoughts on Tomes, which was 2 weeks in the middle of May. The first book that I read was Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. This book is set in the 90s in the South, and it follows a woman named Patricia who is part of a book club, and she's kind of sick of her life, to be honest. She's a housewife, she's bored, and so she and a few of the ladies from her book club start this other book club where they read true crime and talk about grisly murders and serial killers and a bunch of stuff like that. Definitely not the social norm for the time. A man moves to town into a house down the street from her, and shortly afterwards people start to go missing, and Patricia is suspicious of this man for good reason, and she starts to believe that he might be a vampire. So she has to convince her friends that, first of all, she's not crazy, and second of all, this man is dangerous and needs to be stopped. I'm sure you can guess how well that went over for her. I did enjoy this book. I gave it 3.5 stars. I started it around midnight one night and then just stayed up literally all night reading it until 7 o'clock in the morning, because the first half of this book was so good. Like, it was genuinely terrifying. It was really, really good. And then it kind of fizzled out from there. It got kind of not boring, but compared to the first half, it was much less interesting for me. The scary, suspenseful parts were pretty much non-existent in the last half of the book. I also found that the ending was kind of unsatisfactory and like anticlimactic. I also didn't like the use of some of the triggering content in this book. I haven't read very much adult horror, so I don't know if these tropes are just things that are pretty common in this genre, but I personally, I don't read this genre very much. So I'm not used to seeing it, and I don't think I would want to be used to it. But basically, there were a few instances of sexual assault in this book. One of them was against a minor as well. With books that deal with that topic, I don't mind if it's there, if it serves a higher purpose, like if it's for social commentary or to tell a story, because obviously these stories are important to tell, and it's an important topic to talk about. But a lot of times it just feels like it's being used for shock value and also to make the villain seem like a villain. And that's what I felt like here, and I don't like that. It makes me uncomfortable to read it. I just don't like reading it. So for me, like, reading those scenes really brought this down for me. I don't like reading that. It just makes me sick to my stomach, especially the way that it was used, because again, it was just for shock value. I found like there was no real purpose behind it. It was just to be like, hey, that villain is really bad. And that's it. So that really brought down my reading quite a bit. But the first half of this book, just chef's kiss. Fantastic. It was so fucking scary. And this was my Medievalathon pick to get a pet chicken, which is to read a scary book. Next up, I read Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. I'm sure I don't need to go into detail for the plot of this one, so just to keep it short, this is book 2 in the Hunger Games trilogy, and it follows Katniss Everdeen after the events of her time in the arena. And that's all that I'll say about it, because this is a sequel, so I don't want to go into spoilers, even though like the entire world has read this, but whatever. I fucking loved this. This was so good. This was a reread for me. I gave it 5 stars. I adored this. I read this series for the first time when I was a teenager in 2012, I think, around there. And at the time, I loved this series, but I love it even more now. I think it's just a really interesting political story. It's very relevant to right now. And this is without a doubt my favorite book in this series. I think it's so good. I love Katniss as a character because she's not a kind of character that you see very often. She is unlikable. She's gritty and mean. She's angry all the time for good reason, but still. And like her most interesting part of her is that she is just like her mental health is rapidly declining, again for good reason. And I think that's so interesting to read because it's realistic. If any of us were in this kind of situation, we would not be okay, and Katniss is not okay. And I love that about it because, you know, it just feels more real and also different from what we often get in YA heroines, where they're just like lovable and they're somehow magically fine after the events of whatever their story is. Katniss is not okay. I just love that. I think it's so interesting to read. So very happy that I reread this book. I thought it was just so freaking good. Oh my god. And this one was my pick for Medievalathon to get a pet cat, which was to read a book that starts with C. Next up was Exit Strategy by Martha Wells. This is book 4 in the Murderbot Diaries series. I fucking loved it. It was so good. And I'm sure all of you watching, if you've watched my videos in the past, you're probably rolling your eyes because yes, I am once again talking about Murderbot. I'm sorry. I will stop eventually. This is about an AI security robot who has hacked his own government module because he just really dislikes humans, thinks they're the dumbest things ever, and just wants to spend his time watching soap operas and being left alone. And basically the gist of the story. But of course there is something always getting in the way of Murderbot being able to just live his life in solitude. Usually a dumb human. This book and this series in general is just an absolute delight. I adore them. This one wasn't my favorite out of all of them so far, but I did still love it. They're just really fun, light reads and just really, really entertaining. I love them. So 4 stars for Murderbot. You go, Murderbot. And that was my Medievalathon book to get this brown outfit thing. A tunic? I don't know. Whatever it is. This, and that was to read a book under 300 pages. I then read Mockingjay by Suzanne Collins. I just went over the plot, so I won't do it again, but also fantastic read. Really loved this book. I gave this one 4.5 stars. It wasn't quite Catching Fire levels of good, but it was still fucking amazing. And again, Katniss. is a hot mess. It's just so interesting to read. I really enjoy it. I'm not gonna go over what I just said for Catching Fire, but so good. Solid read. And this one was my Medieval-a-thon book to get this lovely green dress thing, and that was to read a book that has yellowed over time. This is definitely not going to focus, but if you compare the pages to this new book that I have, it is definitely yellowed, so it works. After that was Undercover Romance by Lyssa K. Adams. This is the sequel to the Bromance book club that I read earlier this year. I gave it 4 stars. I loved it. It follows Mac and Liv, who are both characters from the first book, as they attempt to expose a sexual predator who is a celebrity chef and also Liv's now former boss. Along the way, they of course fall in love because this is a romance book, but they also learn some very valuable life lessons. Mac goes on a journey of learning how to love and also getting over childhood traumas that he never really got over. And Liv has to learn how to be a good feminist, a good friend, and how to not be judgmental. I thought this book was really well done. It handled these topics pretty well, I thought. This is coming from somebody who has not dealt with sexual assault in the workplace, so take my opinion with a grain of salt. But from what I read, I liked how it was handled. I did have some issues with it overall, but like, in general, it was a really good book and definitely a solid read. Liv is a great example of unlikable characters that I really enjoy. She is judgmental, she doesn't listen, she thinks that her opinion is right above all else and that only she knows what's good, and she has to learn how to not be like that. And so reading her in the beginning is very difficult because it's just like, oh my god, just shut up and listen, please. But I like that. I thought it was really good social commentary and it was well done and it was a really interesting journey to watch. It's one that I'm sure all of us has gone through, and if you haven't, you probably should because you most likely need to. We all are raised with ideas that maybe aren't quite right, and when we get older and form our own opinions, we have to unlearn what we were taught as children. And that's what Liv is doing in this book. She's unlearning the opinions that she formed and realizing why she may not always be right and why she has to listen to others. So I thought that it was really interesting, it was well done, and I just really enjoyed this book. It was fantastic, so 4 stars. And for Medieval-a-thon, I read that one to get a bow and arrow, which was to read a romance novel. Next up was Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy by Cassandra Clare. This is a short story collection following Simon Lewis, who's a character from the Mortal Instruments. This takes place, I believe, just after the end of the Mortal Instruments, while Simon is dealing with not having his memories and training to become a Shadowhunter. I really loved this. It was so good. I've said a few times on my channel that like I used to love this world, and over the last couple of years I've completely fallen out of love with it, and I've been waiting for a book to pull me back in, and this one kind of did that. It really did. I'm not sure why it was this one out of all of her books that like pulled me back in, but it did. Not fully, like I don't think that I'll ever fully be back in love with this series, but this one got me closer than I've been in 3 or 4 years, I think, so I really enjoyed this. And it also made me so hyped to read Chain of Gold, because in this book we meet James Herondale in a flashback in one of the stories, and I am already in love with him. I would die for him. He is a cinnamon roll, and I cannot wait to read Chain of Gold, which I did not think I would ever say, but here we are. And this book got me a pet goat for Medieval-a-thon, where I had to read a book that was high on my bookshelves, and as you can see, my Cassandra Clare books are on the top shelf over here. This was also my first tome topple book, and I used this book for the prompts, a tome from a series, and the tome that's been on my TBR the longest. I've had this book on my TBR since 2016, and I've been avoiding it since then. Oops! I then read Lair Dreams by Libba Bray. This is book 2 in the Diviner series. This takes place in New York City in the 1920s and followed a group of diviners who have some sort of magical powers, essentially. They all have different powers, most of them. And in each book there is a different sort of issue that's happening. So far they've both been ghost related. And in this one, the issue is there's a sleeping sickness that's plaguing New York City that causes people to fall asleep into a horrible nightmare, and then they don't wake up. And after a few days they die. So the diviners have to figure out what's going on, what's causing this, and how to stop it before more people get hurt. This book was so good. I loved this one. It was awesome. I definitely liked it more than book 1. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really well done, and I think it would have gotten a higher rating if Evie wasn't there. I really don't like Evie as a character. I think she's so annoying. But aside from her, this book was so freaking good. I loved how the horror was done in it. I thought that it was woven into the story and it was really successful in freaking me the fuck out. It definitely did. In the first book, the horror is done in a way where it's more like a jump scare type of horror movie. So there'd be like one time where something is really, really scary and then there's nothing for a while, and then you'd have really, really scary and then nothing. Whereas this one, there's just like really small bits of things that are kind of freaky woven throughout the whole thing, like every couple of pages. And for me, that works so much better because it just slowly makes me more and more tense, and it makes the build up way better. So I personally loved how the horror was done in this one versus in the first one, and just thoroughly enjoyed it. I just bought the next 2 books and I cannot wait to get to them. This series is turning out to be really, really good. I was kind of skeptical after the first one. I did like the first book, but not as much as everybody else seemed to. But this really did it for me. So for Medievalathon, this book got me this fantastic green outfit that has strong elf vibes, and I'm very here for it. And for that, I had to read a book that had green on the cover, so lots of green here. And then for Tome Topple, I used this to read 1 tome and to read a tome audiobook, which I definitely recommend the audiobooks for these. The narrator is fantastic. She does like different voices for all the characters and they're really well done. She has a fantastic range. And the last book that I finished this month was The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I finally read that. This is one of the books that I'm reading for my I finally read that project that I'm doing, which I'll link that video down below if you want to go check it out. So I'll be doing a full video review for this one soon. Not sure when, but at some point shortly. So I won't go into too many details here, but this was really good. I was very pleasantly surprised. I gave this 4 stars. It really surprised me. This book follows Jude and Taryn, who are both mortal girls, as well as their fairy half-sister Vivi, after they were whisked away to fairyland when Vivi's biological father brutally murders their parents in front of them and takes them back to fairy with him. So so they're raised in fairy, they make a life there, but they are treated very, very poorly because they're mortal, and Jude gets sick of it. She's mean, she's angry, she has good reason to be, but she's still very angry. There are attempts on her life and she finally just snaps and goes, enough is enough, I'm not dealing with this anymore. And so she does something about it. Jude is another example of a fantastically done, unlikable main character. She is an asshole, and I love it. Because for her to be all nice and sweet would not have been realistic. Like, anyone going through the bullshit that she did would be an asshole by the end of it. So like, I really enjoyed reading her just being this angry, petty child, and it was so good, and I really can't wait to read the next ones. I do think that this book could just be a standalone. I was satisfied with the ending. I don't really feel a need to read more books in this series, except for the 2 characters at the end. I am looking forward to that drama unfolding. I won't say spoilers, but I really want to see how that relationship turns out, because it's gonna be interesting. So but otherwise, in terms of plot, like, I am fine with this as it is. I'm really only going to read the sequels because I just want to see that drama. I think it'll be really entertaining to read. So 4 stars here, and look forward to a full review in this one in my very first episode of I Finally Read That. And for Medievalathon, this book got me a pet fox. I really went hard on the animals for this one. This is probably considered to be gold, but I'm calling it a shade of orange, so deal with it. And then the first book that I DNF'd was Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, which is a bit misleading because I am planning on finishing it. Just won't be for a while because I've been reading the ebook for it and it is just not working for me as an ebook. So I'm going to wait for my library to reopen and then I'll take it out physically, and hopefully that'll be better for me. Basically, my library's ebook app, they don't format their ebooks properly. So when you're going through pages, like you'll be on page 5 for like 2 or 3 pages. It shouldn't be a big deal because like you're still reading pages, but it's very frustrating when like I've been reading for a solid hour and I look and I've only gotten through 10 pages. It's really frustrating, and so I think physically reading this book would work much better for me. So it's not DNF'd yet. Technically, who knows what'll happen. I might end up hating this book, no idea. We'll see. But as of right now, I'm still planning on finishing it. And then I also DNF'd The Secret History by Donna Tart. I'm sorry, I know this book is so well loved and just everybody adores this book, but I do not. I made it through 63 pages and then DNF'd it and immediately unhauled it. This is going into my unhaul pile for whenever my local used bookstore opens up again. This will be going to them. The writing is stunning. It is truly beautiful writing, but the characters, oh my god, I fucking hated them. Like, and again, I like unlikable characters. I love to read them because they're so entertaining and they're different from what we normally get. But in this case, oh Jesus, they were so bad. They were so hard to read and I couldn't deal with it, so I'm not dealing with it. Basically, with unlikable characters, a big reason that I love them is because they're just fun to hate. I'll use Game of Thrones for an example. Like, Cersei, I love to hate her because she's just this evil, vindictive monster and she's just really entertaining, where it's like, what kind of horrible thing are you gonna do next? It's really fun to hate her. But then you have characters like Joffrey, where like that character just lowers my enjoyment of whatever I'm reading or watching. And for me, all of the characters in this book were Joffrey's. All of them. And I just, oh, I could not deal with it. They were horrible to read, and so I'm so sorry, but this sucked. Moving on. So that is it. That's everything that I read for this month. Not my best reading month. I'm in a bit of a slump right now. If you normally watch my videos, then you would know that Sundays is normally when I do my vlogs. But I've only actually read one book this week, which was The Cruel Prince, and so I have about 4 minutes of footage for my vlog. So I'm gonna put this one up today. It's already 5 p.m. so it probably won't be until pretty late. What can you do? So I'm just going to combine this week and next week into one vlog. Hopefully I'll actually read more next week, but yeah, so that'll be it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this wrap up, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye!